Welcome back. Ukraine has gone a long way since in 2023 Biden, instead of providing Zelensky the supplies he had promised to stop the Russian threat on its script, engaged in an absurd gradualism born out of his unfounded fears of escalation and Jake Sullivan's stupid ideas. And although the damage caused by Spiderweb was not as significant as I would have liked and as originally reported, it was another undeniable successful strike inside Russia with all its implications that has on Russian morale. Equally undeniable are two facts that are not receiving enough coverage. 2024 has been a record year in casualties for Russia, and 80% of Russian casualties are caused by drones. This shows that if Europe gets serious about defense, as Jack Watling expects or hopes, Ukraine could turn the table on Putin if it's given enough time. On one hand, Spiderweb has shown what drones can do for smaller countries with smaller armies to counter the size of larger countries like Russia. The expected Russian offensive for this summer will be the test for this hope, though, because then Ukraine will be holding the line against an overwhelming force. Yet the progress made is undeniable. At least one obstacle has been overcome, even though 80% of the global drone market is dominated by China. Ukraine, with European and the United States help, has been able to produce over 90%, 95% of the drones used at the front locally, domestically. And that's remarkable considering that in 2023 these drones were do-it-yourself drones produced in local kitchens and in wherever place Ukraine could afford, all that while being under fire. Even better, Ukraine's innovations on warfare will be able to use Europe not only to introduce innovation in the European defense overhaul, despite Brussels' slow bureaucratic mechanism, but they have in more recently being produced without Chinese parts and at a lower cost, so giving Europe a good example of how the at least the production of artillery and drones should look like. Innovations that includes innovations with fiber optics and even the use of artificial intelligence. So we are not talking, despite its more modest in beginnings as do-it-yourself drones, they have reached a level of sophistication that could help Europe contain the Russian threat at a lower cost in terms of treasury people, soldiers. Other limitations remain, though. For instance, Europe is still too dependent of Starlink for intelligence to guide the drones, and Eutelsat, the closest alternative in Europe, is a French company, needs to increase satellite terminals to increase coverage, because that's the main obstacle for Eutelsat to replace Starlink if it's so needed. Yet Eutelsat is in talks to increase satellite terminals in Ukraine. This progress should be receive more coverage and be speed up, because we are not talking about we are talking about a war in which time is of the essence. At least during the transition to a moment in which a successful Trump's Mer's overhaul of the Europe's defense can rest on more solid legs. Yet it's concerning that Chinese production, as it has been pushed aside from Ukraine, has focused on supplying Russia. Uh, in fact, China currently provides 80% of critical electronic components for Russian drones. And this has been made in an increasingly open way as torpid, clumsy U.S. foreign policy in both the Biden and Trump's administration has been pushing Xi more and more towards Putin. And no, this assessment of Ukraine progress in drones is not a naive attempt at hope. Consider how drones has put out of combat about 30 or out of 80 Russian warships in the Black Sea, so forcing Putin to withdraw his fleet in the Black Sea to safer ports, or consider the attacks to the Kerch Bridge in Crimea, which is the best Zelensky could do with what he has, since Biden denied him more effective versions of the ATACMS and gave him only the much less effective M52 with cluster bomb warheads that are not powerful enough to, for instance, bring down the Kerch Bridge, or considering a spider web more recently. This is just a sample of how Europe could, let's be honest, Trump won't do it, so it has to be Europe. But how could Europe stop Putin's aspiration, which unfortunately Trump shares, at becoming king of one of three areas of influence, as defined not by economic power, because by economic power it would be the United States, Europe, and China, but by military power, which then would be Russia, China, and the United States. So, with Russia displacing Europe. Even if you are a fan of spheres of influence, you would want to base them on economic power. So, as we mentioned, Europe, China, and the United States, each backed by its own monetary zone or a combination of them, euro, yuan, and dollars, with no incentives to avoid it, as Putin needs to avoid them to siphon Russian wealth out of the country, or to avoid sanctions. And if, because of its dependence on energy, Europe falls into Putin's zone, expect from him and his oligarchs the same rapine Putin and his oligarchs expect from their domains, for instance, Africa. It's just enough to see the terms of the security agreements the Russian proxies have, the Russian paramilitary group, the private armies have reached with dictators and strongmen in the Sahel, or what they plan to do in Afghanistan. So is by far not like Belt and Road. So Europe should get serious about defense and follow Merz, not Trump. I have said it several times before, and yet it's discouraging not only to see Meloni and Starmer seeking to cling the peace process in Ukraine to Trump's unreliable record, but also preferring the easy resource of unenforced sanctions, which still are largely unenforced. Just to give you an example, the European Union was the fourth largest buyer of Russian fossil fuels in December, their imports accounting for 17% of the top five purchasers. LNG comprised the largest share of the European Union's purchases of Russian fossil fuels, 39%, followed by pipeline gas, 38%, according to the Center for Research on Energy and Clean Air, CREA. Add to this the timidity that Europe still shows at the issue of Russian reserves, despite counting on several assessments backing this issue, like the president of Iraq in 1990, the assessment made by Lawrence Tribe that I have mentioned several times since it was issued in 2023, and the hard to dispute fact that there is no other country representing more instability or for the financial system besides Russia, or that is trying to invade other countries or destabilize other countries like Russia. This is why other countries have legitimate concerns when, instead of jumping on MERS card with clear guidelines to overhaul defense procurement as soon as possible, FDR and Stalin did it in 1 year in 1941, and after 3 years, Europe is still unable to solve immediate needs like explosives for artillery shells and batteries for drones, for instance. But it's in part because of this hesitant reaction in Europe that Trump is more interested in doing business with Putin, which goes through turning Ukraine into Belarus, as I said, than in lasting peace in Europe. So Europe has to show strength and decision, and the best leader to incarnate that is Merz. But Merz, even in Germany, has very slim, tiny majorities, so he needs the support of the rest of Europe, and not the calculating silence that seems to expect to get the most while they expect the imminent fall of Merz's effort just to satisfy the petty interest of some local defense contractor. Committing 800 billion euros was the easy part. Now it comes the consolidation of its defense industry with clear guidelines, and that step must be taken right now. As mentioned before, let me mention it once more. Merz is serious about defense. If Europe tries to get smart with him, the price it will pay will be to be part of Trump's area of influence when it comes to energy, and of Putin's alone when it comes to everything else. Europe must be efficient when it comes to investment in defense and effective when it comes to production of supplies that are urgently needed to hold the front right now, like in the case of artillery and drones, those two especially, and present a common front to buy what it cannot replace immediately from the United States, like in the case of Patriots and Starlink. And the media has an important role to play by putting the spotlight less on ceasefire processes we know Putin is not going to respect, and more on the procurement overhaul that is needed to precisely prevent Putin from engaging in new military adventures in Europe and in other places vital for supply chains from food to rare earths. And having said that, let me leave you with our newscast.
Good evening. This is Brian Thomas Simons, and these are the main headlines of this hour. Among other news,
Elon Musk declared that he was deeply disappointed in Trump. In an interview given to the New York Times, Elon Musk declared that he was deeply disappointed in Trump, before adding that his children from all his families won't be able to work in Doge as he had promised them. which made him feel like a bad father. Dishonest President Trump took my campaign money and then canceled all my subsidies and contracts. He played me for weeks, making me believe he would cancel Medicaid and Medicare to pay for Golden Dome, and then this is the gratitude I receive. It's not fair. You can't tell me those people who died in the third world because I cut USAID funds have suffered more than me. Can you? Protested Musk before the interviewer. Russia presents new list of demands to put an end to the Ukraine war. After a new call made by President Trump to the Russian leader, Vladimir Putin, the latter sent him a new list of demands through Vasily Nebenzia, representative of the Russian Federation before the United Nations Security Council. The document has 356 demands. Among them, 1. The West must stop arming Ukraine. Disarming that nation will be part of the Kremlin's commitments once Yanukovych is installed as its new leader. 2. Zelensky must be delivered in a cage with bars as described in the sketch attached as Annex A to the demands. That way, he would be ready for his trial for crimes against humanity. 3. Ukrainians will be sent to Siberia, where they will live happy lives, while Russian nationals take care of the reconstruction of Ukraine. 4. After Yanukovych is installed as the new president, NATO will admit Ukraine as a member with veto power, just like Orban, but without the chance of suspending its voting rights. 5. Europe will be able to choose between buying Russian gas through Nord Stream 2 or through the Trans-Caspian pipeline that goes through Georgia. Not doing so will result in war reparations in favor of Moscow. 6. Germany will re-elect Olaf Scholz as Chancellor and dismiss Merz. Nothing better than that afraid sissy man, clarified the Russian representative. 7. Europe and the United States will return the Russian reserves they never used to help Zelensky with interests and penalties, clarified the Russian representative. Gabbard will revamp Trump's intelligence briefings with Pepe Lafrog as presenter. As getting President Trump focused on the daily intelligence briefings has become increasingly challenging, Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard has hired a Fox News producer to upgrade the presentations with Pepe Lafrog, a character who enjoys the president's sympathies. The president was visibly bored and barely followed the briefings, so we decided we had to change the format. We haven't decided whether we will use animation or an actor in a costume. But those are the options we are discussing, declared the Director of National Intelligence.
This has been the news of this hour. Sponsored by Church of the Holy Redeemer's Power in the Spirit. Have you accepted Jesus Christ as your personal Savior? Did you vote for Trump in 2016 and then in 2020? This is the right church for you. If so, Church of the Holy Redeemer's Power in the Spirit is the only Christian church that can promise you in the Lord to have 72 virgins in heaven for only a donation of $50 a month. You will have access to those 72 virgins in heaven. For an additional $25, you will be allowed to replace 10 of them, and for $100, Heaven Premium, you will be allowed to choose them for yourself. Guaranteed, if you're not satisfied with those 72 virgins after you die, full refund of your money. We accept Visa, MasterCard, American Express, and Discover.